Hello everyone and welcome to my talk She Sells Root Shells by the C++ Shore, or less cryptically, a talk about building a safe execution environment. Unfortunately, we cannot do this in person in Dublin, but we can try to make the best of it. I know I do. Alright, let's begin with a bit of lateral movement. I'm a distinguished engineer at Symantec in the Security Technology and Response Group based in Los Angeles. We are now part of the Broadcom family. I've been in the industry for almost 20 years, but my interest in security started long before when, armed with Turbo Debugger, I mustered the courage to insert the floppy disk labeled infected, and that's how I explored the DOS virus Hi460. I started as a threat analyst and moved over time to developing security technologies. Alright, let's take a look at the agenda and see what we have planned for this session. We begin with a quick glance at some of the challenges security solutions have, then we'll discuss about various techniques for robust software, from virtual machines to isolating components inside of a single process. That leads us to CP3 or C++ Protected, a safe execution environment that we created at Symantec to secure our static scanning engines and other technologies. So let's start with the goals and challenges of security solutions. The main goal is to protect, surprise, I know, and this can take many forms like on-access scanning and blocking, cloud-based scanning services, or EDR and threat hunting. Another goal is to deliver a secure product, which fits directly into the first goal, as we don't want to open up new attack vectors. And of course, we want to be efficient. We don't want to burn unnecessary cycles. This becomes more and more relevant as devices get more polarized, either small, portable with tiny batteries, or large data centers. When we think of the operating environment for our security solutions, we traverse the spectrum from endpoints to gateways, appliances, and ending with backend systems. The need for updating rapidly is seen for a wide range of content, from AI models, hashes, strings, support for new scripting objects, or tweaking opcodes and APIs in an emulator. Given the complexity and frequency of these content updates, we need to put in place various guardrails to limit unwanted side effects. This brings us to a discussion around hardening. The main concept that enforces application safety is the process. Having a separate address space limits the direct damage of memory corruption and resource leaks and gives the operating system a way to control privileges. For large-scale applications, in some cases, security solutions too, execution is often structured into multiple processes. While the operating system offers out-of-the-box support for security boundaries, it comes with certain limitations. For instance, sessions on Windows or effective user IDs in Unisys are a good way to limit who can inject into a process. Virtualization, though, provides a much stronger separation of security domains, and it has seen an increase in popularity once hardware support became more widespread. We have here a few examples, plus my favorite, DOSBox. Well, you never know when you want to play Monkey Island. However, the traditional virtual machines, while useful for certain security services like for detonation, are still a bit too heavy for many uses. And for that, we come to a form of lighter virtualization called containerization. Now let's go back and look at the process itself. The success of von Neumann architectures in the last century is attributed in great part to its amazing simplicity. Simple design, simple rules, simple circuits. That also brings simple problems and some not so simple problems too. Having code and data in the same memory makes it easy to start executing unwanted things as a result of data corruption. Let's quickly go over some of the exploit mitigations that apply at process level. We'll start with NX or no execute. This refers to the ability of marking memory regions to prevent execution. While the idea is not new, as it was introduced more than 30 years ago in SPARC and PA-RISC, it only became widely adopted when commodity hardware like AMD 64 introduced in the NX feature. By the way, the marketing term they used was EVP, Enhanced Virus Protection. Windows uses AMD's NX or Intel's XD feature under the name Hardware Assisted DEP, Data Execution Prevention. While NX solved the simple jump to payload type of exploits, it led to the rise of ROP, return-oriented programming, formerly referred to as retulibc in Unix world. ASLR or address space layout randomization marked another milestone in exploit mitigation. This feature aims at introducing high enough entropy for memory layout to make it hard to achieve reliable exploitation. Operating systems went through several rounds of improvements of this feature by widening the randomization range and by adding more kinds of regions to be randomized. For some, ASLR looked like this in the first iterations to become this later on. Another significant improvement came in the form of compiler support for stack cookies, which significantly raised the bar for exploiting stack buffer overflows. While being a valuable mitigation, one of its main limitations is guessing the cookie value. Windows employs a different exception model compared to other operating systems, namely SEH, Structured Exception Handling, with a post-Titanium addition VEH, Vectored Exception Handling. Exploits using SEH as another way to control execution flow led to Microsoft's mitigations SafeSEH and SEHOP, SEH Override Protection. SafeSEH uses compiler-generated information to validate the exception handlers of a PE module, and SEHOP validates the entire chain of handler records before giving them control. In the Unix world, the dominant executable format is ELF, which, unlike PE, does not allow relocations in read-only sections. The procedure linkage table and global offsets table need relocations, thus are writable, and this creates the opportunity for exploitation by overwriting a single pointer in these tables. GCC introduced a very effective mitigation called RELRO. After relocations are applied to a certain range of interest, which contains PLT and GOT, the pages are turned read-only. To combat exploits that rely on overwriting function pointers or vtables, Microsoft introduced CFG, or Control Flow Guard. It requires compiler-instrumented binaries, such that every indirect call goes to a stub that checks the call target address to be present in a sparse bitmap of allowed targets. Some important limitations of the technology are around dealing with loading non-CFG-enabled modules and with the way unaligned function addresses can be treated, due to the need to reduce the bitmap size. Nonetheless, CFG significantly increases the difficulty of exploitation when employed appropriately. Looking back at some of the attempts to increase security with the help of hardware, an interesting initiative was Intel's MPX. Introduced in 2015 with Skylake processors, this technology aimed at protecting against buffer overflows by simply recompiling legacy C and C++ programs. We can see highlighted some of the new bounce-checking opcodes added to support this feature. This entailed a massive effort to design and produce MPX-enabled processors, as well as adding compiler support in ICC and GCC. All that came to an abrupt stop in 2018 when GCC removed MPX support. The reason for it being a mix of performance, memory consumption, and efficacy when compared to other instrumentation techniques, in particular ASAN, or Address Sanitizer. I guess the lesson here is that retrofitting security is a very tough problem. By the way, as a side note, I'm using here Compiler Explorer for the screenshot, an amazing tool if you want to quickly see the code generated by various compilers. A close enough acronym but an entirely different feature is Intel's MPK, Memory Protection Keys. It brings the ability to change permissions for memory ranges without altering page tables, which incur significant performance penalties. Pages are tagged with a 4-bit key, allowing the user to select whether reads and writes are allowed for each of the 16 possible keys. This allows interesting uses like having components hide or protect code and data from being tampered from within that process. For instance, executable-only memory can be used to prevent dynamic gadget lookup for JIT-ROP attacks. An exciting new technology is Intel CET, or Control Flow Enforcement technology. Once processors implementing this feature become mainstream, exploiting vulnerabilities becomes even more of a contortion act. For instance, the shadow stack feature changes the behavior of opcodes like call and ret to maintain a secondary stack of only return addresses. Most of these technologies described so far affect the entire process when active, but sometimes we need to go even smaller scale to deal with multiple security boundaries inside the same process. The idea of plugin isolation is encountered on a wide range of apps, from games supporting user modes to scanning engines or browser sandboxing. Speaking of which, one such technology was Google's native client project. The idea was to harness the speed of statically typed languages to enrich the web experience. A modified GCC toolchain was used to produce instrumented binaries. The binary format enables easy verification of certain rules such that sandbox escapes are prevented. Aside from the sandboxing capabilities, a great advantage of the native client was the performance. Still, the idea of streaming platform-specific executable code was not well received in the web context. This led to the second iteration dubbed Pinnacle, Portable Native Client, where the same portable bitcode is sent to browsers to be compiled for the target platform. This time the toolchain was changed to Clang LLVM. Pinnacle was also near native. However, adoption remained a problem and eventually led to this project's sunset. Shortly after, we saw Mozilla's ASM.js project gaining a bit more popularity due to its out-of-the-box compatibility with all browsers. The performance, although significantly lower than native clients, could be improved through browser-specific optimizations. Just like Pinnacle, ASM.js compiles using an LLVM-derived toolchain called mscripten. A more recent effort, also coordinated by Mozilla, is WebAssembly, a successor in spirit of ASM.js. LLVM is used here to compile code from C, C++, and Rust. WebAssembly defines a virtual architecture that allows having a relatively simple JIT transformation. Simple next to JIT makes me chuckle. Given its growing popularity, WASM is a very attractive technology for sandboxing. What we explored so far entailed taking existing code and trying to contain the damage that can be done. But what about improving the language constructs from source level in order to increase the robustness of the code? Let's start with the safety features of the C language. Well, that was certainly quick. While the C language carries the blame for enabling most common types of vulnerabilities, it also wears the crown for lifting programming from machine-specific assembly to low-level portable code. Actually, given how much flack I give my colleagues because they prefer C++ over C, if they see this slide, they'll think I'm losing my touch, so let's rectify that. Maybe you've seen this meme before. I guess the moral of the story is that given enough experience due to C's simplicity, you can learn to see it coming. C++, on the other hand, makes you feel cool, but often the end result is the same. Although C++'s higher abstractions make it easier to use constructs that prevent some of the common mistakes from C. Often praised for safety are RAII and smart pointers. And in the last decade, the 3 years cadence for new standards greatly improved the health of C++'s ecosystem. Part of designing new features is the idea of zero-cost abstractions, as in you only pay for it if you use it. As for the negatives, half a century of backwards compatibility gives us a long time to repeat mistakes. Compatibility is great for usability, but not necessarily for security. There is little that can be done in the language to prevent use after free, dangling references, and other lifetime problems. Similarly, race conditions are hard to diagnose and prevent at compile time. Incorrect use of language features or APIs leads in many situations to undefined behavior. Using such safety-challenged languages like C and C++ nowadays is considered dangerous without the use of modern techniques, starting from basics like warnings as errors and high warning level during compilations, and moving on to static code analyzers, code coverage, sanitizers, in particular ASAN, and refactoring tools like ClankTidy to search and replace common bugs or lift outdated constructs into more modern idioms. And of course, fuzzing. While all these help, they require discipline and resources and often involve detecting problems at runtime. Now, only if there would be a better way to describe programs using a language that prevents most of the common problems. And in comes Rust. The language is designed around the idea of preventing memory corruption and concurrency issues. One of Rust's core rules is that aliasing and mutability are mutually exclusive. Lifetimes can be explicitly expressed in interfaces and no undefined behavior is allowed. To ease adoption, Rust offers FFI or foreign function interface constructs to talk to other languages through C-like interfaces. A common misconception, though, about its safety is that Rust applications do not crash, which is inaccurate. Operations that cannot be proven at compile time to be safe and do not violate the language rules end up being compiled with implicit runtime checks that panic on error. For instance, using an external input to index an array can only be done safely if the index is checked at runtime to be within bounds. Especially when mixing languages, we may want to recover from a Rust panic, and that can be done through the catch and wind mechanism. If there's one thing you take from this talk, I would like it to be this. Consider Rust as the first choice for new components. Hopefully I convinced some of you. Now, this is not a pyramid scheme, but if you convince 2 other developers to switch to Rust, you become a seasoned Rustacean. Coming back to reality, we face the problem of how to secure now our components, which, for Symantec at least, it means mostly C++ code. So let's explore our CP3 hardening solution. To recap, one constant challenge that we face in the static scanning technologies team is around providing algorithmic detections as updatable content and without requiring changes to the engine side. Along the decades, we had engines that included various interpreters to allow custom logic, but they had a domain-specific language, were very limited, and the performance was far from native. Just like some of the sandboxing technologies we showed earlier, we decided to explore LLVM compiler infrastructure, which is in great part responsible for the compiler revolution of the last decade. Some of the key features of LLVM are modular design. You can plug custom modules at various stages of compilations. Languages are translated into a common intermediate representation, or IR, which greatly simplifies the front end, the part of the compiler that takes the source code and generates the IR, like Clang, for instance. The SSA form, or single statement assignment, is the key to LLVM's great optimizers. And target platforms are supported as separate backends in charge of generating efficient code. To create a safe execution environment, we need mainly two ingredients: a way to instrument code modules for containment of potential vulnerabilities, and a hosting library to load, execute, and enforce the sandboxing rules. And in practice, the third part comes after the initial release to keep that cage door closed. Don't ask me how I know. So let's start exploring the instrumentation. CP3 started as an experiment on playing with LLVM's intermediate representation. We mentioned that LLVM has a pluggable compilation process. So we wanted to start just by doing small transformations at this IR layer, then let optimizations and machine code generation to produce an efficient binary. That saves us from shipping just-in-time compilers or bytecode interpreters. And lastly, we noticed that the set of opcodes in this IR is quite limited, and more importantly, the opcodes that we're interested in are just a few. For instance, these are the only opcodes that interact with memory: load, store, fence, compare, exchange, and atomic read, modify, write. If we instrument this handful of opcodes, we can enforce a boundary for the in-process sandbox. Moreover, we can treat reads and writes differently. We can block accesses going outside the sandbox or let them bounce around in the confined area. Since we are merely instrumenting the code in this intermediate representation, that means we have to abide by the target platform's ABI rules. That implies we have the real thread stack used during execution. Now, mutable local variables often require writing into the current stack frame, where sensitive control flow information is also stored. The local's usage pattern influences the code generation. For instance, here we see that the local variable y does not end up on the stack, as it lives only in a register. In this second example, the compiler must dedicate a place on the stack since we need y's address. So how can we safely separate accesses to such locals from other sensitive call stack data? For that, we need to look at the alloc-a opcode, which is the only means by which mutable local variables are created in LLVM. This allows our instrumentation to move out all such variables into whichever confinement we deem suitable for our sandbox. Here's an example of a program vulnerable to buffer overflow. The number 2 under the crosshair is the troublemaker, as it allows fread to dump twice as much data as allocated. The caller function also has some local buffers, which we just fill in with dashes to make the exploit more obvious. So grab a compiler, some popcorn, and let's see. Running natively under GDB, we see the execution flow going off rails. We see here we almost control the entire set of bytes in the program counter. However, under our sandbox, we see that the overflow only affected other local variables, but did not affect the execution flow. We return to main in spite of overflowing into main's locals. That's an interesting property. Mismatching prototypes or violating ODR, the one definition rule, constitutes undefined behavior in C and C++. In practice, most ABIs allow calling mismatched prototypes and returning successfully because the caller cleans the stack. If it crashes or not, you don't really know until you try it. It's the programmer's version of Schrödinger's cat. A notable exception is Microsoft's ABI for x86, where calling conventions like stdcall and fastcall require the callee to clean up the stack. A confused caller pushing more or less than what's needed ends up with a mismatched stack pointer. One may think that symbol decorations are enough to guarantee stack consistency. stdcall and fastcall append a number matching the size of arguments. However, this is not true if we look at the following example. We see the same decoration, but different values popped from the stack. So how do we solve this problem? One possible solution is to forcibly decorate symbols through instrumentation. Another is to cross-check definitions and declarations just before linking. Now, let's look at indirect function calls. Ensuring call stack integrity for indirect calls is a trickier problem to overcome, as function pointers are commonly used in non-trivial programs. Function pointers are ordinary in C world, whereas in C++, virtual function tables are basically structs of function pointers. So how can we make calling function pointers safe? We group functions by prototypes and we assign them token IDs. Then we build tables to convert tokens to function pointers. When a token is used, we use the table to convert it back into a real function pointer. When a bad token is used, since we instrument the conversion, we can block execution before going off the rails. Worst case, the corrupted token looks just like a real token and we end up calling another function. However, since we grouped them by prototypes, we end up calling a compatible function. Here's a carefully contrived example to illustrate this situation. So we have a table of function pointers. The first two items point to the same hello world printer. And we have here this expression which can evaluate only to 0 or 1. I did that so that the compiler doesn't optimize. Nowadays they are way too smart for us. So we are indexing the item 0 or 1 from the greeters table. That means our function pointer will definitely point to the hello world printer. Then we call that function. After that, we choose to move 4 bytes into the function, which could be in the middle of an instruction, we don't know, and then we call it again. So let's see what happens. Running natively, we see that we managed to print the greeting twice, but we crashed somewhere before returning from the second print call. But in CP3's case, we surprisingly end up calling the other greeter that has the same prototype. So technically, a vulnerable program could be exploited through a call-oriented programming type of exploit, where gadgets are entire functions with the same prototype and from the original program, which is pretty much on par with having a logical error where we instruct the program to call the wrong function. And logical errors cannot be prevented, at least until AI overlords take over our puny programming tasks. This method of dealing with indirect calls can also be used for supporting external functions to provide a controlled way of interacting with the outside world. Let's explore now how to deal with libraries. Since we instrument the code, we must compile all libraries. That includes the standard C and C++ libraries. Furthermore, we need to replace the lowest level syscalls to talk to the host side through that controlled interface. The LLVM project comes with its own libc++, so that's an easy choice to make. But for the standard C library, there are several options available with varying degrees of ease of integration and licensing requirements. We have microC libc, diet libc, muscle, newlibc, bionic, and of course glibc. We pretty much covered what we need to obtain a hardened binary. What's left now is the supporting component to load, unload, execute, and enforce the desired runtime guarantees. While our binary is greatly restricted, it can still crash, divide by 0, or use an unsupported opcode. To deal with that, we must trap certain exceptions. On Windows, we have the seg and veg options to do that. And on Unix-like systems, we have signals. Another aspect we must face is dealing with sandbox modules that run for longer than we deem acceptable or end up in an infinite loop. If we want to preserve the stability of the host process, then we must be prepared to have a way to recover even from infinite loops such as the one here on top. This turned out to be a much tougher problem than expected, but we could solve it even without the help of instrumentation by doing some gymnastics from a separate thread, calling these APIs on Windows and these ones on POSIX compliant systems. Another challenge we face is stack exhaustion, and this turned out too to be quite challenging for the different kinds of OSs. If we pass a large enough number for the Fibonacci function, we could exhaust the stack. Or traversing in order a binary tree that is not balanced could easily do the same. On Windows, there is actually an exception for detecting stack overflows, but unfortunately it is not suitable for us. And here's why. This is like a normal thread stack. We have some stack pages used, then a part that is unused. This is the guard page here. And the red zone are the pages that get mapped only when we actually need to deliver a stack overflow exception. Now let's assume that our program almost exhausted the regular stack. It's about here and triggers an exception. Now the control is given to NTDLL to dispatch the exception, and NTDLL, while trying to dispatch, reaches the red zone. This causes the exception stack overflow to kick in, and now we get a nested exception thrown that actually points into NTDLL. We may be in a state that we cannot recover from in this case. So a possible solution is to instrument function prologues to stop when the stack nears that red zone. On POSIX targets, complications arise from the lack of page probing for large function stack frames. Clang doesn't actually honor the F stack check switch, although GCC added the option a long time ago. Luckily, the Rust core team also hit this problem before us, prompting the LLVM team to at least offer the attribute that causes stack probing checks to be inserted during code generation. Now let's do an apples to oranges comparison with some of the other sandboxing technologies. I'm saying apples to oranges because we don't have the same samples to try on all the technologies. It's actually hard to see on a wide enough range of programs and different use cases. But at least the overview page for Native Client and Pinnacle mentions that running at speeds within 5 to 15% of a native desktop application, while other documentation on the official project site mentions that Pinnacle generated binaries for AMD 64 are achieving 25% overhead compared to the same code compiled natively. WebAssembly's performance depends on the browser implementation, and research shows that on average it runs with an overhead of 55% in Chrome and 45% in Firefox, but with a worst case exceeding twice the native execution time, which means an overhead of 100%. CP3's unscientifically observed performance ranges from 10 to 35% overhead, with an average of 15%, making it a fairly competitive solution. But aside from the performance aspect, an important factor for the adoption was the fact that the hosting library is very small compared to, say, something that dynamically generates code at runtime. As for the uses of this technology, we started with some of our scanning engines for like machine learning, x86 emulation, JS, VBS, VBA emulation, CMD PowerShell and Unix shell interpreting, and pretty much for digging into any file format we need to. We also have sandbox modules for handling events coming from AMSI, command lines, WMI, Windows Registry, and many others. In conclusion, LLVM is a great technology that allows very interesting uses. However, exposure to C and C++ must be done using the right tools and protections in place. And looking towards the future, use Rust and hack without fear. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Take care and stay safe. Cheers.